Silent UF is the newest title on this recent movement that we're seeing as the franchise finally starts moving forward once again. And this is the first product that aims to be a completely new entry to the series. Just like any new Silent Hill, it's something that's been surrounded by controversies since it was first announced. And with every new trailer, more and more people voice their displeasure with how the game seems to be shaping up. And after playing through its entirety 4 times, I can definitely say that I like this game. Experiencing this world, the combat, and slowly piecing together this amazing story was honestly a really unique experience. And it was through many ups and downs that I kept on trying to grasp what this game really is. I was surrounded by the discourse of how this is not fit to be a Silent Hill game, while also receiving a great amount of critical success. It's definitely a pretty interesting situation. But despite all that, even though I did enjoy the game, this video is going to be a first for me, where instead of looking at something and really trying to appreciate everything that makes it so unique, I like to focus way more on the negative side of things, and how this game, even though reaching amazing moments at times, it still frustrates me to no end. And this is just my opinion. I'm not telling how you should objectively see the game, but something that's built upon what I value on these experiences the most. So that's why I want to talk about how Silent Hill F doesn't know what it wants to be. And I'll start by talking about something that, even though for me is definitely not the biggest problem with the game, for many people is by far the biggest disappointment. Of course, I'm talking about the combat. Since the first gameplay trailers were shown, it became really apparent how this game was trying to do something different. The moment people first saw the great amount of hit stops that came with every attack, discussions started going around about how this game's vision was already completely wrong. But it was only now, after playing the game, they were able to really get a picture of what the devs were going for. The systems in this game are pretty rooted with all the pillars of what we are accustomed to seeing in the survival horror genre. In this game, every weapon has a limited durability, and this is paired with having to also manage your stamina and sanity meter. It really makes you pay attention to how you manage your resources, especially now where we even have to manage our inventory slots. When starting the game, you're given only 2 difficulty choices, being either hard or story mode. And well, as in the other games in the genre, it's already established that everything is built upon the idea of being smart with your encounters and balancing risk and reward. So I did feel like picking a mode where the focus seems to be only on enjoying the story could be a detriment to the experience. And right in the first few encounters in the game, I was already pretty happy with what we got. I really like the idea that, even with this really robust combat system, the core survival horror gameplay was still present. The game even warns you about cutting your line of sight to the enemy as a way to avoid encounters. And that's something that I've seen talking about a lot in the community. You're not supposed to fight every enemy you come across, and they created an extremely dense experience. Not only by doing my best to sneak around every encounter, but also by the fact that when you actually get into a fight, it can be pretty hard. The enemies are strong, your dodges are severely limited by your stamina, and it can honestly be super tricky to get your timing right with how erratic the enemies move. Honestly, I love the system. Walking around the fields while dodging the stumbling enemies through the fog was tense and really rewarding. It instantly became clear that the game had really gone for the survival horror feel that always keeps you in the edge of your seat. It's really great. And that lasts for like maybe a few hours, and then everything quickly falls apart. So even though I said that the combat system wasn't what I disliked the most about the game, it might still be the most glaring example of how the team really didn't settle on what this game might be. It is true that in here we have almost all the fundamentals of a great survival horror system, but as you get further and further into the game, the structure starts to support the systems less and less. Already in your second visit to the other world, you find yourself kind of forced to just fight your way through enemies. Like, you can still theoretically run past them, but when taking into account that the game just went to great lengths to not only give you a weapon with infinite durability, but also make a point that it's obviously supposed to be one step above everything you've seen in the Fog world, the thing that is being transmitted by the game design is obviously that you do need to take these enemies head on. And as I said, the game can be pretty hard. I think that the difficulty is pretty good for the occasional moment where you fail to escape an encounter, but when just fighting enemies again and again, it can only get quite frustrating, especially when you're still having to manage your resources and health items. And as you keep going, it just gets worse and worse. Honestly, by the end of the game, I almost felt like I was in a hack and slash game. When going back to episode Gaoka, you'll have an encounter that's literally unavoidable. You need to defeat the enemies to progress to the path. And the enemy in question is one that you have fought before as a boss fight. It's not only extremely tanky, but also has an AoE and long range attacks. And just to top it all off, its main ability is to birth other monsters, which turn the fight into a gank encounter, where you're literally fighting 2 or more enemies at the same time. And the biggest problem here is that while this is happening, all of those pillars of the survival horror genre are still in place. In theory, you should be struggling with your resource management. Your weapons can break and one enemy encounter should already be a risk by itself. And both of these design philosophies are literally just clashing against each other. Honestly, while playing this, it can be extremely frustrating. But it gets worse when you realize that literally 3 minutes later, you're faced with the same encounter once again, with the same enemy that can spawn ads that you have to defeat if you want to move forward. And that happens 2 more times. With this, you can probably at least have an idea of what type of combat you can find in this game. There's multiple sections where you either don't have any choice besides fighting, or at least it doesn't really feel like you do. With moments where enemies literally will just spawn right behind you out of thin air. And honestly, going to this game on the hardest difficulty on my first playthrough was insanely frustrating. I was baffled by how the systems were clearly at odds against each other, and in the end, it honestly just felt like a mess. But you see, the reason that I'm really frustrated with this is not simply because the designs don't work with each other. It's because I can clearly see that if there was a clear commitment to either of these decisions, it could honestly be really good. In the beginning of the game, you get a pretty great idea of how this could work. It was more focused into these tense and more challenging moments. And as I said, I was enjoying myself a lot while playing this way. But also, on the other hand, in the boss fights and especially in subsequent playthroughs, you can get a pretty good idea of what this game could be if it actually focused completely on the action. The bosses were generally pretty insane. I never expected seeing a gigantic AoE attack with insanely cool effects that look straight out of a Souls-like in a Silent Hill game. Getting more accustomed to dodging and using focus attacks went a long way in giving you an idea of what the combat in this game could be. When you open up more Mamori slots, you can get up with some pretty cool combinations. New tech that allows you to instantly do a heavy attack after a dodge, easier windows for perfect dodges, or even faster charge times for focus attacks. Gives you a glimpse of what this game could also have been. Maybe having a bigger focus on enemy variety and leaning more on that repressed side of Pinnacle, where the game actually goes out of its way multiple times to show that she does go through these outbursts under the weight of how everything is always speeded against her. It would be completely far from what you expect from a Silent Hill game, but it just baffles me that the team ended up clearly trying both of these design philosophies while not really committing to any of them, which, as I said, just leave the game completely at odds with itself. Not only not realizing any of these visions, but directly harming both of them. And it's really sad because, as I said, I like this game. And I would have loved to see what it could have been done with more focused decisions. And of course, we do have always had a kind of a trend of the combat in the Silent Hill series, never honestly being all that great. Even on the Silent Hill remake, which I absolutely adored, I still thought that there were way too many enemy encounters. But this game was by far the one that bothered me the most, especially because, as I said before, it's not exactly the fact that the combat is horrible, but actually because if done right, it could just be so much more. Once again, this is definitely far from being my biggest problem with the game. If you've watched any of my other videos, you can probably see that there's one thing that I always focus the most on every game that I talk about. And with Silent Hill F, is something that was by far my biggest disappointment in the entire experience. From the first moments when you set your sight in the town of Epsugaoka, it already paints an extremely compelling picture. The tall mountains encompass the horizon, instantly driving the feeling of a place that's completely isolated, a pocket of life that, if you're not part of it, it could feel almost meaningless. As you slowly make your way into the town, the washed out color palette instantly engulfs you, where even the greenery that surrounds your path seems hesitant to bring about any strong colors to the picture, serving only to slowly guide you into the empty streets. The unpaved road surrounds itself with solid and imposing wooden houses and stores, cloth signs shake by the wind, as up above, the almost erratic power lines crosses over in between you and the light grey skies. As the streets get narrower and narrower, the buildings stand taller. Hinako's path seems almost unescapable. Various items lay still throughout benches and porches, giving the image of a lived-in world devoid of life. The town not only tries to give you a faithful representation of this period in time, but also delivers an extremely compelling vision. The back streets become confused, winding around narrow pathways, even bringing a sense of verticality, making it all more and more disorienting, sometimes almost serving as a nod to Hinako's path itself. The confused layouts that seem to go in all directions, but also something so cluttered that forces you no other choice besides following its set path. And it's through the fields covered by fog that the world starts to lead you deeper and deeper into its vision. The school corridors, dotted by classroom doors, to the outskirts of the town, where the foliage becomes almost excessive. The fog withers amidst the trees, as story gates lead you to old and forgotten temples. It's incredible. But one of the most striking sights comes not from only traversing and experiencing this world, but also from slowly seeing it decay. Breeding masses of flesh cover the world, followed by a mass of figambana flowers. The corruption that seeps deeper and deeper into the town, almost as a manifestation of Hinako's time that corners her into a choice as the seconds bleed from her grasp. And the way that it's all brought to life is breathtaking. The softer and less saturated color palette is forcefully tainted by these strong and imposing tones of red, desperately latching on to every surface on its path. And seeing how this grows with urgency more and more throughout your journey is just incredible. The world that Neobards created is nothing short of stunning. From the sound design to the visuals and layouts, everything seems to come together with the sole purpose of immersing you in its atmosphere. and it's so masterfully done. And then they don't really do anything with it. You see, this point that I'm about to make might be the most selfish in this video, but it was truly something that I was really excited to experience in this game. It was genuinely a shame seeing this insanely well-crafted world always unable to reach its potential. For most of the game, it almost felt like the devs were unwillingly to really lean into the atmosphere. The first walk down from Hinako's house gave me so much hope with how much I wanted to experience this world, but it feels like throughout the entire game, there's almost no moments where they even let you breathe. There's practically no point in this journey where just the world and the atmosphere by itself takes center stage. When you're put in the forest path going up the mountain, as I said, the atmosphere is incredible. The overwhelming trees, the fog, the dotted wooden structures that you find slowly peeking out from your sides, everything creates an insanely cool picture. But there's just so many enemies. It feels like you can walk for more than a minute without the game throwing you into yet another encounter. It just doesn't stop. The moments where you're first shown into the now corrupted back alleys of the town for the first time, instead of subtly trying to embrace you with the heavy atmosphere, the game makes sure to go out of its way to clearly communicate that there's an enemy stalking you. And it's not only by the sounds, it makes sure that you can see the monster, with characters even directly talking about it. And in the forest path, they once again do the same thing, with literally the same monster that you've already seen before. Like, I truly don't understand. It's almost like they're scared to really lean into all the amazing art direction and the truly overwhelming feelings that seems always so integral to the Silent Hill series. Just like with the combat, it's so weird to me how they went to such lengths when creating this world to just never truly lean on it. But for me, there's an even bigger problem with how they tackle a lot of this. It's something that, in a way, does have an answer to why they decided to do it like they did, but unfortunately, this answer is by far the worst part of the game for me, and something that I'll explain more in depth in the next section when talking about the story, so please bear with me for a little bit. First of all, I know that these are different studios with different experiences and design philosophies, and I do think that this comparison can come off as being a little unwarranted. But just for now, I like to talk about how another game tackles a world that's extremely similar to this one. And well, the game that I'm talking about is the Silent Hill 2 remake that came out last year. I'm not comparing both of these games because they are both Silent Hill games. I think that with a franchise as rich as this one, there's a lot of space for experimentation and trying to really tackle different ways of expressing what you want to convey. But I really believe that, at least for me, there was one aspect of how Silent Hill 2 Remake tackled its world that I absolutely adored. I loved that game. I did make an entire essay on it, and once again, one thing that I focused a lot was the world. Both of these games starts in a pretty similar way, the slow and immersive walk towards their respective towns, but this moment where James first steps into Silent Hill is probably my favorite in the whole game. Having this entire first section where you're freely exploring the town in the fog world, walking through the empty streets and being met with various establishments that you can actually walk into, gave me almost some kind of sandbox feeling. But my favorite aspect is actually the fact that once you walk into one of the stores, you can look out through the glass windows and it's there that you see it. Slowly tumbling through the heavy fog, lying figures make their way to the desolate streets. This moment is amazing. It instantly reinforces the idea that this world, this town covered by fog, exists around you, also in a conflicting way. It seems to exist despite of you. which is extremely interesting in a game where everything is mostly a manifestation of James's being. It instantly immerses you into this world. Not only that, but another one of my favorite moments is when you first get to Brookhaven's hospital. How the sunlight seeps into the building right as the doors closes behind you. A clear separation from this fog world while still finding a way to remind you of the world around you. And I think that all that is just amazing. As I said, I love cool concepts, and this idea of the fog world is just so well executed. Always trying to affirm to the player that this is the place where you're currently going through. But now, going back to Science UF, there's an incredibly weird thing that really caught my eye in this game. And it's probably going to be kind of a weird point, but I'll say that Science UF really feels like a video game. And I know, it is in fact a video game. But for me, it was just so weird how there's almost no moments where he actually does try to sell you the idea of this world. Enemies are always conveniently just stumbling to your path, or as I said before, clearly stalking you in a way that's meant to forcibly catch your attention. One moment that really made this clear for me was when you first get to the Ebsugaoka Middle School, and when looking outside the window, you notice that right there, you find Arabari, a giant mass of flesh filled with nothing but anger. I love this creature design. It's striking and extremely imposing. And also, just its idea and the way that it's presented, it's amazing. But I think that it's actually insane how in this moment it's so clearly used as a video game scenario. Only walking around the outside perimeter, almost like it's on rails. There's literally no intent for even a second to sell you to the fact that this monster is anything more than just a game design obstacle. And I think that this is such a shame. As I said, I love not only the world and the atmosphere, but also the concepts of it. And before going to the school, in the cutscene when you see him wandering the fog-filled Ebsugaoka, it just sells you such an incredible idea. This old and empty town where this massive lump of flesh slowly stumbles in between the wooden houses is just such an interesting image. Such a great idea that's not only cool to appreciate from afar, but you feel like you're present in it. But instead, it's presented to you in this completely lifeless way, with no effort whatsoever to really make you feel the situation. And at least for me, this really undermines not only this world, but also this monster that's actually a manifestation of something that's completely integral to Hinako's suffering. And situations like this are repeated over and over again throughout the whole game, as enemies are just so clearly being used as nothing more than an obstacle. And my point is not that these design philosophies are inherently bad. If you're not aware, this is in fact a video game. But what really makes me sad is that there's just so much work put into creating this world. All the masterful ways that the devs went with to sell this incredible atmosphere, these beautiful and striking monster designs, they feel extremely imposing, not only visually, but also on the weight of what they represent. Everything is just so well crafted. Once again, the game kind of just undermines all of these creations, pairing it with a really straightforward and functionally focusing design that once again really clashes with another part of the game that's filled with potential. And there's just so much that I would like to say about this world. All the other world sections that keep getting richer and richer in its visual representation the further you go. From the metaphors to the majestic sights that are always fully rooted in the Japanese culture, and especially the section towards the end of the game, as Hinako, while drowning into the weight of the choice that was forced into her, is presented with this fully corrupted world that's violently clashing with the shining sun on the horizon. A color palette that was unprecedented throughout the whole game. And it was something that was so well done and impactful, really leaning into transmitting these feelings through the atmosphere in an overwhelming way. I didn't even care about the fact that this short section had like 3 different combat encounters getting in the way of really letting you feel the weight of this moment. It was just so insanely good. And it was on these moments where the game really focused on its incredible visuals and design to transmit the feelings to the player that I wish the most that the devs had really tried to truly sell us the fantasy of this world. But as I said, there could be an argument as to why they never really tried to make us feel that we're in this world. And it's something that's part of what is probably the best thing by far in the entire game. If you're not aware, the writer for this game's narrative is someone called Ryukishi7, also commonly known as the GOAT. I'm a big fan of visual novels, so when this was first announced, it was safe to say that I was extremely excited. And now, after finishing this game multiple times, I can safely say that going into this with really high expectations, somehow, it still ended up being even better than I imagined. The town of Ebsugaoka is a place with an extremely rich history, shaped by people who came from far away to this isolated place among the mountains. It shares various tales of gods and religion worshipping. A divine tree is said to look after the town residents, holding back the threat of a poisonous water dragon that was plaguing the surrounding lands. To Oinari-sama, a fox god who the humans, desperate to hold into some kind of faith as support, switched to worshipping in the later years. Your journey through this game is always surrounded by this tale of a reign of gods that rule over the land. From episodes of divine retribution and clash between divine beings who are worshipped and who are left to time. As Hinako slowly makes her way to her journey, you understand more and more about all the history and what it all culminates to, reaching endings where you realize that Hinako is literally caught up between this duo of gods, from people being possessed and some completely stripped of their own choices, having endings where you find yourself directly fighting against these very gods themselves. Going through the story is extremely interesting and super engaging, especially when you reach the moment that you realize that out of this is not at all what is happening in this game. When first hearing about Science Web, besides the involvement of Ryukishi7, there was another thing that got me incredibly excited about the game. It was the fact that it would represent the struggles of a young woman growing up in the 1960s Japan, somewhere that was plagued by ideas of gender disparity and patriarchic values. It's an extremely interesting idea to explore, because for the most part, Silent Hill games always dive deep into character traumas and personal experiences. But in here, it's not only something that deeply affected not only Hinako, but all women at the time, but also something that's still a problem that can be clearly seen in our society today. So it would be something really meaningful to a lot of people who have felt the weight and the ramifications of this very problem on their own lives. In this case, Hinako, someone who throughout her life was always really detached from the imposing gender norms, which in turn left her as someone who struggled to find a place she belonged to, and besides too, who always promised to only see her for who she was again and again bashed by the simple fact of not following what society seemed to dictate. One of the places where the narrative and direction impressed me right off the bat was on the interactions between Hinako and her friends. I really like how they're portrayed. The way that the game chooses to show these characters' real feeling is not subtle, but overwhelmingly in your face. Every interaction, every word that's spoken, always serves to just further drive the central point of what their character is made of. And with how incredible good the cutscenes in this game are directed, it creates not only a feeling that I honestly haven't seen before, but also it can come across as something truly terrifying at times. Another thing that's just amazing is how, as I said, the game tells the story not only hidden to everything that you came across, but also using the tale of gods and worship. A long time ago, a child named Kotoyuki was bitten by a fox that made its way into the town. A fox that was part of all the divine deity that's present in Ebisu-Gaoka, and he's in turn possessed by this fox, losing himself and becoming stricken with a curse, something that will force him to be completely in love with this certain girl, which coincidentally was the same girl that helped him right after being bitten by the fox. As in Hinako herself. You see, in truth, Kotoyuki was born from an affair between a maid and the leader of the Tsuneki family. A family that's known for their wealth and long-standing reputation. And now, years later, the time to inherit the position of the heir is finally upon him. And for that, being such a central figure for this family, he needed to conform with its customs and find a bride. And that is when an arranged marriage is formed between him and Hinako. It's genuinely amazing how this is somehow literally the same story, reaching the same plot points, but also told in a completely different narrative. When I first realized this and saw that it was something that's present in literally every aspect of the game, it was just insane. The prowess that's needed to write a story of this level is crazy, and honestly just made respect Ryuki 7 even more than I already did. There's one specific moment in this game that was easily one of the most striking and well thought out in the entire narrative. And that is the two rituals that Hinako takes besides the Foxman in the other world. The scenes here are insane, all completely unfiltered, depicting agonizing experiences that just go on for an uncomfortably long time. The feelings that this section manages to transmit are incredibly raw and hit extremely hard, but it truly shines when you look at what these moments actually represent. For Hinako, who always made an effort to follow her own path and was always exposed to her mother becoming nothing but a husk of her husband's amid years of abuse, the mere thought of marriage and how it's perceived in the society truly goes against everything that makes her herself. The idea of giving her hand in marriage compares to literally painstakingly cutting her entire arm off. The idea of giving up her maiden name and becoming nothing more besides a husband's wife is comparable to ripping off half of her face as she loses the person who she truly is. And the idea of going on with this marriage is the same as being literally branded by her husband's ownership. This shows not only simply her aversion to the idea, but also the weight of what marriages means in a society that expects a woman to strictly follow such an oppressive and submissive path with no character being given a chance to simply be someone. And the way that it's all transmitted visually is just masterfully done. This serves as the core for the whole game, how Hinako is always clashing against a part of herself that really fell victim to the society's contracts, and the part of herself that wants to tread her own path and have the right to make her own choices. And there's a lot more to talk about. For example, how this game treats Kotoyuki as someone who sits on the other side of this patriarchy, but also falls victim to its strict frame, or how we learn more and more about Hinako's relationship with her friends and family. But honestly, the story can be so rich with meanings and metaphors that it would just take way too long for me to actually explain it all. So now, I'm going to unfortunately do what I've been doing in this video once again and talk a little about the things that I don't think that work that well paired with this narrative. First of all, to really get the full picture, you kind of need to play the entire game 4 times. I've seen a lot of people make comparisons between this and Nier Automata, which is just a masterpiece of a game. And honestly, I really can't see how you reach this conclusion, because the game design in Silent F is not even close to being daring enough to warrant another entire playthrough of the game. In subsequent runs, the story changes a lot. They're not really alternative endings, but more of a direct continuation of how the story progresses. But on the gameplay side of things, it ended up just being kind of uninspired. You're once again making your way to more and more enemies, being faced with the same objective of finding 3 things to advance over and over. And besides the last moments, outside of the story, most of it ends up being almost exactly the same experience. And it's really a shame, because it definitely gets in the way of people experiencing how great this narrative can be. Another problem that I have, now more focused on the narrative side, is the review that's made when going for the true ending of the game. We didn't talk much about Hinako's relationship with her parents, but it was also one of the things that I was extremely excited to see portrayed in a game like Silent Hill. It's something that I experienced myself, and know full well just how much can impact who you become. But I not only feel like through most of the game, it never really commits on fully exploring the depth of the situation, but for some reason that I genuinely can't even begin to grasp, the game kind of decides to put an entire redeeming undertone to the entire thing, where you discover that her father wasn't really just simply being abusive because of his frustrations and debt, but is kind of a weird victim of the society structure, where he's forced to not show any weakness in front of his daughter. And if that wasn't enough, there's another review where her mother is actually sick, and the father is once again in debt because he wants to pay for a surgery that the mother desperately needs. I don't get it. Like, of course, these things don't excuse the whole situation, but they just undermine it so much. It's almost disrespectful in a way, not only shying away from tackling these problems, but also just turning in this thing right at the end. And for what? With this unfortunately being a problem that so many people can understand the weight and how it can truly destroy a person. Like, in real life, there's normally no nobler undertone that could be meaningful in most cases. So this was something that, to me at least, really felt unnecessary and just undermined the situation in kind of a weird way. And lastly, there's just one thing that I wanted to talk about. And this is, as I said before when talking about the words, probably my most selfish take. It's not something that is inherently bad, and for a lot of people it might not even matter at all, but for me, it was by far the thing that might have made me dislike this entire game the most. And that is the fact that through the entire time you play in Silent F, almost everything that happens doesn't really happen. It's just not real. Most of this game actually takes place in Hinako's head. There's no city covered in fog. These characters that are running around and reacting to the world around them aren't actually there. The moments where trying to find Rinko or going up the mountain to reach Shu's house, or the idea that you're exploring the school and seeing this world being slowly consumed by corruption. All of those things don't happen at all. As I said, it's not something that should be taken as a negative. It definitely has its place, especially in a game that's built completely upon Hinako's perspective of the world and of her situation. But for me, it's kind of a big deal. We're playing through an interpretation of Hinako's suffering, and not as Hinako forced to face that interpretation. As I said before, I just really love cool concepts, and this idea of the town that's entirely covered by fog, this tangible place that calls people to it and proceeds to bring all of their deepest regrets and desires to life, forcing them to take an unfiltered look at themselves. I just love it. In all of these other games, I would just stop and think about how right now you're placed in the middle of a place like this, seeing the other world that truly dives deep into a personal experience, and jumping between that and once again the fog world, seeing other people also trapped into this town, losing themselves more and more into the weight of what they are. I just think that's honestly awesome. It's a world that I truly love, really like experiencing and being part of it. So, if before I was talking about how this game fails to really pull me in and make me believe in this world, when I discovered that all these concepts weren't really happening here, it honestly just took me out of this experience even more. But yet, once again, I'll say that I do think that this is more of a personal problem with what I wanted when going to this game. It does serve the narrative well and adds a lot to the metaphorical tone that the entire game is shrouded in. So, in the end, I ended up talking about a lot of negatives to this game. This is probably the only video that I'll ever make in this way, because I honestly just enjoy so much more when I can just talk about how much I love something. And in the case of Silent Hill F, I honestly just really do like it a lot. Most of my frustrations doesn't come from a place where I think that the game is just bad, but just that the potential that it had if it was able to be clear with its direction and truly realize the ideas that they had is just really high, especially when accompanied by such an absurdly great story that's told in an incredibly compelling way. But also, Neil Barnes did an incredible job in bringing this vision to life. Even with its flaws, it's definitely a super compelling experience. It makes me super happy to not only see this franchise releasing mainline games once again, but also taking risks like this. As much as a lot of what you might think that defines what is a Silent Hill game might not be present, the standards of care that the team had when creating this, paired with the insane way that the narrative was expressed, makes this an incredible entry to the franchise. And I definitely never dreamed of seeing Ryukishi 7 running a Silent Hill game. So yeah, even with all these negative points in this video, I just want to say that this game is truly an incredible experience, and something that will stay with me for a long time. If you're watching this video until now, honestly, thank you so much. It was a lot of work and I was always kind of doubting myself about making a negative video like this. You see, if you didn't notice, I've made every song that plays in this video, and my main thing is actually music. I just do this for fun on the side, so if you enjoyed it, please consider leaving a like and commenting what you think. It helps a lot, and also, if you want to see more videos of this type, feel free to subscribe to the channel. Also, as I said, this is something that I'm just doing on the side, but I do make more serious music with vocals and stuff, and the link is also in the description. It would mean a lot to me if you could give it a listen, and who knows, maybe you'll find some value on it. A month ago, I also finally released my first album. It's called A City That Doesn't Exist, and it's a project that's extremely important to me. It tackles lots of pretty sensible subjects, and is by far the most important thing that I've ever made. So it would truly mean the world to me if you give it a listen. But once again, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next time.